Filmmaking requires a lot of different skills and a lot of different disciplines, and independent filmmakers have to know even more skills than filmmakers who might be working on a big Hollywood movie, because they're constrained by budgets and often have less crew to fill different areas and aspects of the film production and post-production process. In this video, I'm going to talk about the most valuable skill to learn as an independent filmmaker, and that skill is visual effects. Now, I know what some of you may be thinking, that visual effects aren't nearly as important as crafting a great story or directing actors or knowing cinematography, but I can assure you visual effects is the most valuable skill to learn as an independent filmmaker. And in this video, I'm going to share with you the 5 reasons why that is true. Reason number 1 is visual effects allows filmmakers to execute on their ideas. Filmmaking starts with the imagination. Filmmakers have a vision in their head, and it's their job to get that vision onto the screen. That requires a lot of different skills and a lot of tools and often people to help make that happen. One of the worst feelings as a creative person is to have your imagination limited by the skills you possess. If you don't know how to do certain things, then it doesn't matter how amazing your story is or how imaginative or creative your vision is for the film that you're making. If you don't have the skills to execute on that vision, then you're kind of dead in the water. Visual effects allows filmmakers and enables them to take what's in their head and to translate that better to what's on film. A great example of this is in my most recent feature film, Transmission Volume 1, where I had a scene that I had written and it needed to take place on a plane. Not that I wanted it to take place on a plane, it had to take place on a plane for narrative reasons. This was actually crucial to the story and to articulate the world that I'm trying to create. I contacted many locations that had airplane interior sets, had fuselages that you could rent for the day. I don't know if you've seen my locations video, but I tried this strategy where I asked these location holders if I can go and shoot for even like 20 or 30 minutes on one of these fuselage sets. And the answer was absolutely no. They were really looking for me to book a 12-hour day for many thousands of dollars. Now, I didn't have that money because I am a visual effects artist and because I've invested over 10 years into building an arsenal of tools and knowledge when it comes to visual effects. I was able to execute on this vision without the help of anyone. I didn't need to pay a visual effects artist to create these images for me and to create the 3D and 2D assets. I was able to go to the resources that I had and the skills that I had, and I was able to pull from these and create this from scratch myself. Now, I did have a few visual effects plugins and tools that I've purchased over the years, but my knowledge of visual effects enabled me to seek those specific things out because I knew that they would do the job. So any way that you look at this, an investment in learning visual effects really enabled me to execute on my vision, to execute on the images that I had in my imagination when creating this world and this story, and to achieve exactly what I wanted that I had storyboarded. So if you take a look at this shot from Transmission, you will see that this was actually shot on a small green screen stage, and the whole thing is essentially CGI. Even the chair that this character is sitting in is not real. He's actually sitting on a stool on this green screen stage. There was no airline seat in there, and the airline seat and the background and the shadows of him sitting there, of his body connecting with the seat, were all created digitally in post-production using visual effects. So this is the first reason why I would strongly argue that visual effects is the most valuable skill for independent filmmakers to learn. Reason number 2 is production value. By production value, I mean adding spectacle, adding texture, adding expensive looking visuals to your film. Now, some of you might be thinking that filmmaking is better off without a lot of CGI and without a lot of flashy visual effects, and that could be a fair point. But by production value, I'm not just talking about packing a film with CGI and with digital characters and all this type of stuff. Film is a very malleable medium, and what I mean by that is that when you take a look at a film image, a filmmaker who doesn't have an understanding or a base in visual effects might just see that image as a flat 2D image, something that is like composed and exists on the screen. And if you have a background in visual effects, you start to see all of these different layers as malleable, as editable, as things that can be removed and changed and enhanced to make your film look more expensive. So a great example from Transmission is this shot and adding tombstones in the background. I wanted to film at a cemetery, and a cemetery was going to be prohibitively expensive, even with a filming permit and with insurance. It was going to cost thousands of dollars a day. And the only way to be able to film this during our production was to film at a park that could double as a cemetery, and then I added the tombstones in for effect in the background. Now, I suppose that this could also be executing on vision as well, which kind of takes from my first point, number one, but it's also adding production value because I know that filming in a cemetery costs tens of thousands of dollars for a larger production. I can fake it to make it look like we had the budget to film at a cemetery just by adding in these kind of out of focus tombstones in the background, and also gave the impression that we were able to kind of go above and beyond what our means were on this very, very micro budget film. So enhancing your movie with visual effects adds market value from a business standpoint. If you're trying to sell your film at a film market, or you're trying to sell it to distributors, visual effects go a long way in making your film marketable. Reason number 3 for learning visual effects as an independent filmmaker is it gives you a competitive advantage. What I mean by that is visual effects is becoming an ever increasingly important cornerstone of the filmmaking process and of the filmmaking industry. As we move into the future, filmmaking and game design are starting to merge in very interesting ways. Game engines such as the Unreal Engine are being utilized in film and television productions. Having an understanding of visual effects adds more value to you as a filmmaker in the market. By now, I have written and directed 3 feature films, and to this day, I've never been offered money to write a script or to direct a film. But I find myself as a visual effects artist turning down work all the time to do visual effects supervision and visual effects related artistry and work for other people's films. Even if you aren't going to perform the visual effects yourself, even if you aren't going to create 3D models and do 2D assets and do compositing and rotoscoping, match moving or tracking, even if you aren't going to perform these visual effects tasks for other people's films, the consulting alone has value in the marketplace. You can actually invoice and charge because this is a business, and the more valuable skills you can learn and be proficient in as a filmmaker enable your worth as a tradesperson, as a skilled professional in the business, in the industry, to perform different types of tasks and to be able to charge money for that and essentially make a living. These skills are only going to become more valuable in the future, so you're actually seeing a return on your investment if you spend the time to learn how to do this stuff today. The 4th reason to learn visual effects as an independent filmmaker is to fix it in post. Now, I know that a lot of you might be rolling your eyes. This is a very often cliched type of expression, fix it in post. And if you don't understand the visual effects process, if you don't know how to do visual effects work, then that's really kind of where that joke stems from, is those who are unfamiliar with the process might always suggest, hey, we'll just fix it in post, and are not aware of what is required on the day and what is required to record in camera while you're shooting a film to make that even possible. Learning visual effects as an independent filmmaker enables you to have the foresight before you go out shooting and while you're shooting your film to optimize that shot and that footage for the visual effects process. If you understand how to properly light a green screen, if you understand how to film in a way that's going to get you great tracking markers and tracking data, if you're filming in a way that's going to give you the best possible footage for a set extension, right? Like, knowing those skills while you're filming enable you to do this work easier than someone who might go out and shoot all of this footage and then reach the post-production process and say, all right, now how do I do this? If you're saying that at that point, it might not even be possible to do what you were hoping to do, and you're gonna have to go out and find those people who know visual effects, and you're gonna have to either convince them to do your film for free, or you're gonna have to pay them money and hire them to do this work for you. If you know how to do this stuff, then you can replace branding and signage very easily, and you could put in your own fake brands if you're building a world. Having these visual effects skills enables you as an independent filmmaker to do so much more than those who don't have those skills and aren't familiar with what it takes to actually fix something in post. Another very common fix it in post thing that happens all the time, and most people don't even realize it, is post-production stabilization. Gimbals or steady cams, even handheld, is often enhanced in post-production and is stabilized using plugins and tools in visual effects programs. Now, these tools are very, very easy to learn, and some of you might already be using these without having an understanding of the visual effects process. What some of you might not realize, however, is if you know that you're going to need to stabilize something in post-production, what happens is there's crop in. You're gonna wanna film a wider shot, wider than you probably would like from a composition and framing standpoint, because knowing how the visual effects process works and knowing that post-production stabilization, camera stabilization through an editing or visual effects program crops into an image and it gets tighter, knowing that that is going to happen would enable a visual effects savvy filmmaker on set to compose a slightly wider shot to allow for that process to happen. If you are just kind of going out and winging it without an intimate and proficient deep level understanding of how visual effects really works, and you haven't gone through and rotoscope footage before, you don't know that motion blur affects rotoscoping. So if you're going to try to remove an aspect from your frame and you have a ton of motion blur, that is going to really cripple what you're able to do in post. It's going to limit it, and it's going to take more time, and it's going to potentially cost you even more money because a visual effects artist will analyze what they have to do. That could also be said for frame rates. If you're rotoscoping an image and you're shooting at 24 frames per second, if you need to rotoscope 24 frames or 1 second, that is a lot different than if you're shooting 60 frames per second. Now all of a sudden, 1 second doesn't really mean anything. You still have to rotoscope 60 frames compared to 24 frames. So the difference between shooting 24 frames per second versus 60 frames per second could actually mean 3 times your visual effects budget for that particular shot, because the labor, the hours that would go into performing the visual effects work on that particular shot to fix it in post or to perform the visual effects is going to cost 3 times more because it's going to take someone 3 times longer. The 5th reason to learn visual effects as an independent filmmaker is visual effects is really a combination of many other skills. And by learning visual effects, you're actually learning a lot about the other aspects of film production. Visual effects is a combination of lighting, of composition, of editing, of color correction. All of these things come together when visual effects artists are creating and manipulating shots. You have to know many, many different skills taken from many different areas of both production and post-production to be able to make this stuff work and to make it look real or interesting or visually compelling. Learning the skills of visual effects actually provides a very solid foundation for many other departments. So an investment in learning visual effects is really an investment in learning the filmmaking process holistically, because you're learning all of these other aspects as you're increasing your proficiency in visual effects. If you are better at lighting and at color correction and at editing and at framing and choosing your composition and at cinematography, then the chances are your visual effects and your films are going to be better because of that, even if there aren't visual effects a part of a particular scene or a particular shot. Your filmmaking arsenal is going to increase exponentially because you've invested into learning one skill that encompasses many other skills in the filmmaking process. So those are 5 reasons why you should absolutely invest in yourself and teach yourself visual effects and get really good at this, because visual effects is not going anywhere. In fact, it's just becoming more prominent in the filmmaking industry, and it's becoming more and more important to the art and craft of filmmaking. The more digital technology enhances our ability to take images from our head and put them on to a screen as filmmakers, the more these skills are going to become the bedrock of what is required to make your film ready for the marketplace, but also enable you as an independent filmmaker to never be limited by your imagination, to never be constrained by the technical skills required to execute on the vision that you have in your head. And as a creative person and as a filmmaker, the challenge for all of us is to take what we have in our head and try to articulate it through these digital tools. And if that's not a reason to learn visual effects and to get good at this, then I don't know what is. So hopefully this inspired you guys. Maybe it lit a fire under you. I've been learning and using visual effects for over 10 years now. My latest feature film, Transmission Volume 1, the one that I will be releasing in 2022, it has over 400 visual effects shots that I did entirely by myself. Everything from full 3D environments to CG characters, stabilizing shots that might have been shaky, to doing set extensions, creating holograms, and building a science fiction dystopic future that my film is set in. It's an incredibly liberating feeling to have an idea in your head and know that you're able to execute on it without help from anyone. So hopefully that inspires you. Hopefully it gives you something to shoot for and maybe to think about. If you found this video helpful, if you found it inspiring, please consider liking and subscribing. Click that bell icon for notifications and smash that thumbs up button. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you next time.